Number 5224. And Pharaoh told them his dream. This signifies about things to come, as is evident from the signification of a dream, namely foresight, prediction, the event, and thus things to come. The subject in the internal sense becomes clear from the context. This verse treats of the new state of the natural, when it is in obscurity because truths have been expelled from it, and how there is then disturbance in it consulting external knowledges about things to come. For when such obscurity ensues, the thought at once occurs, what will the event be? As this is common during man's regeneration in every such state, this state is here described in the internal sense. But such states are unknown at this day, both because few are being regenerated, and because those who are being regenerated do not reflect upon such things. At this day man cares not what is taking place within him, because external things possess his whole attention, and internal things have no importance to one who is wholly occupied with external things, that is, for whom they are the ends of life. Regarding this obscurity, they would say, "What are these matters to me, as there is no money or honor to be gained from them? Why should I think about the state of the soul or the state of the internal man, whether it is in obscurity when truths have been expelled, or in clearness when they have been restored? What would it benefit me to know this? Whether there is any internal man is to me a matter of doubt, and also whether there is any other state of the soul than that of the body, nay, whether there is any soul that lives after death. Who has come back from the dead and declared it?" Thus speaks the member of the church with himself at this day, and thus he thinks when he hears or reads anything about the state of the internal man. This explains why the things that are taking place within man are at this day hidden and wholly unknown. Such obscurity of the understanding never existed among the ancients. It was their wisdom to cultivate interior things, and thus to perfect the faculties of both understanding and will, and thereby to provide for the welfare of their soul. That the ancients gave their attention to things like these is clear from their writings, which are even now extant, and also from the desire of all to hear Solomon. Therefore there came of all peoples to hear the wisdom of Solomon, from all kings of the earth who had heard of his wisdom. And therefore came the Queen of Sheba, who, delighted by the wisdom of Solomon, said, "Blessed are thy men, blessed are these thy servants, who stand continually before thee, and hear thy wisdom." Who at this day would call himself blessed for this reason? Number 5225. And no one interpreted these things to Pharaoh. This signifies that it was not known what would happen, as is evident from the signification of interpreting, namely, knowing what would happen. Hence no one interpreted denotes lack of knowledge, for in the internal sense no one is the negative of a thing, and thus what is not. For the idea of a person is turned in the internal sense into the idea of a thing, as for instance the idea of a man, a husband, a woman, a wife, a son or daughter, a boy or maiden, is turned into the idea of truth or of good. And as above, the idea of a magician and a wise man is turned into that of external knowledges, interior and exterior. The reason of this is that in the spiritual world or in heaven, not persons but things are the subject of reflection. For persons limit the idea and concentrate it upon something finite, whereas things do not limit and concentrate it, but extend it to the infinite, thus to the Lord. For this reason also no person named in the word is perceived in heaven, but in his stead the thing that is represented by that person, So also no people or nation is perceived, but only its character. Nay, not even is any historic statement of the word about a person, nation, or people known in heaven. And consequently it is not known who Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the Israelitish people, and the Jewish nation were. But it is there perceived what Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the Israelitish people, and the Jewish nation denote. And so in all other cases. Thus angelic speech is without limitation, and is also relatively universal. Number 5226, verses 9 to 13. Then spake the chief butler unto Pharaoh, saying, I do remember my sins this day. Pharaoh was wroth with his servants, and put me in custody in the house of the captain of the guards, me and the chief baker. And we dreamed a dream in one night, I and he. We dreamed each one according to the interpretation of his dream. And there was with us there a Hebrew boy, servant to the captain of the guards. And we told him, and he interpreted to us our dreams. To each one according to his dream he did interpret. And it came to pass, as he interpreted to us, so it was. Me he restored to my office, and him he hanged. Then spake the chief butler unto Pharaoh, signifies thought from the sensuous subject to the intellectual part. Saying, signifies perception therefrom. I do remember my sins this day, signifies about a state of disjunction. Pharaoh was wroth with his servants, signifies when the natural turned itself away, and put me in custody in the house of the captain of the guards, signifies rejection by the things that are of primary importance for interpretation. Me and the chief baker signifies both sensuous parts. And we dreamed a dream in one night, signifies what was foreseen obscurely. I and he signifies concerning both sensuous parts. We dreamed each one according to the interpretation of his dream, signifies what would be the result to both. And there was with us there a Hebrew boy, signifies that because of temptation the guiltlessness of the church was relegated thither. Servant to the captain of the guards, signifies wherein was truth that might serve primarily for interpretation. And we told him, signifies that there was perception therefrom. And he interpreted to us our dreams, signifies what was in the things foreseen obscurely. To each one according to his dream he did interpret, signifies from truth. And it came to pass as he interpreted to us, so it was, signifies that such was the event. Me he restored to my office, signifies that the sensuous of the intellectual part was accepted, and him he hanged, signifies that the sensuous of the will part was rejected. Number 5227. Then spake the chief butler unto Pharaoh. This signifies thought from the sensuous subject to the intellectual part, as is evident from the signification of speaking, namely thinking, and from the representation of the chief butler, namely the sensuous subject to the intellectual part. What thought from the sensuous is may be seen above. Number 5228. Saying. This signifies perception therefrom, as is evident from the signification of saying, namely perceiving. What perception therefrom is, or perception from thought, cannot be intelligibly explained, because at this day it is wholly unknown what spiritual perception is, and what is unknown cannot be understood however it may be described. For perception is nothing but the speech or thought of the angels who are with man. When this speech or thought flows in, it becomes the perception that a thing is so or is not so. But this only occurs with those who are in the good of love and of charity, for it flows in through good. In such persons this perception produces thoughts, for to them perception is the general principle of thought. Yet perception from thought is not actually granted to them, but only apparently. But no more can be said regarding this mystery, because, as already said, it is unknown at this day what perception is. Number 5229. I do remember my sins this day. This signifies about a state of disjunction, as is evident from the signification of sins, namely, what is of inverted order, and from the signification of remembering, namely, conjunction. Thus, to remember sins is to be conjoined with what is of inverted order, and consequently to be disjoined from the natural, represented by Pharaoh. For whatever is conjoined with what is in inverted order is disjoined from what is in order. To remember means conjunction, because remembering anyone in the other life conjoins. For as soon as any spirit calls another to mind, he appears to be present, and so present that they speak together. It is for this reason that angels and spirits can meet all persons whom they have known or have heard of, can see them present and speak with them, when the Lord allows them to call them to mind. Number 5230. Pharaoh was wroth with his servants. This signifies when the natural averted itself, as is evident from what was explained above, where similar words occur. Number 5231. And put me in custody in the house of the captain of the guards. This signifies rejection by the things which are of primary importance for interpretation, as is also evident from what was explained above, where similar words occur. Number 5232. Me and the chief baker. This signifies both sensuous parts, as is evident from the representation of the chief butler, who is here meant by me, namely the sensuous subject to the intellectual part in general, and from the representation of the chief baker, namely the sensuous subject to the will part in general. Thus by me and the chief baker both sensuous parts are signified. We say both sensuous parts because there are two faculties in man which constitute his life, the will and the understanding, to which each and all things in him have reference. There are two faculties in man which constitute his life because there are two things which make life in heaven, good and truth, good having reference to the will and truth to the understanding. From this it is plain that there are two things which make man spiritual, and consequently make him blessed in the other life, namely charity and faith. For charity is good and faith is truth, and charity has reference to the will and faith to the understanding. To these two, good and truth, each and all things in nature also bear reference, and hence they come into existence and subsist. And that they bear reference to these two things is very evident from heat and light, of which heat has reference to good and light to truth. And therefore spiritual heat is the good of love, and spiritual light is the truth of faith. As each and all things in universal nature bear reference to these two, good and truth, and as good is represented in heat and faith in light, every one may judge what a man's nature becomes from faith alone without charity, or what is the same thing from merely understanding truth without willing good. Is it not like the state of winter, when the light is brilliant and yet everything is torpid, because without heat? Such is the state of a man who is in faith alone, and not in the good of love. He is in cold and in darkness, in cold because he is opposed to good, in darkness because thereby he is opposed to truth. For one who is opposed to good is also opposed to truth, however he may seem to himself not to be so. for the one thing attracts the other. Such does his state become after death. Number 5233. And we dreamed a dream in one night. This signifies what was foreseen obscurely, as is evident from the signification of a dream, namely what is foreseen, and from the signification of night, namely a state of shade or obscurity. Number 5234. I and he. This signifies concerning both sensuous parts, as is evident from the representation of the butler, who here is I, as being the one sensuous part, and from the representation of the baker, who here is he, as being the other sensuous part. Number 5235. We dreamed each one according to the interpretation of his dream. This signifies what would be the result to each, as is evident from the signification of interpretation, namely what was involved and what would happen. Thus, what would be the event of what was foreseen, which is signified by the dream. Number 5236. And there was with us there a Hebrew boy. This signifies that because of temptation, the guiltlessness of the church was relegated thither, as is evident from the signification of a boy, namely what is guiltless, see below, and from the signification of Hebrew, namely one who is of the church, thus that which is of the church. Its being relegated thither because of temptation is signified by his being in custody, for by the custody into which Joseph was put is signified a state of temptation. This state has been treated of in chapters 39 and 40. The reason why a boy denotes guiltlessness is that in the internal sense a little child denotes innocence. For in the word we read of sucklings, little children, and boys, and by them are signified 3 degrees of innocence. The first degree by a suckling, the second by a little child, and the third by a boy. But as the boy begins to lose his innocence, he signifies that degree of innocence called guiltlessness. As these 3 signify 3 degrees of innocence, 3 degrees of love and charity are also signified by the same, because celestial and spiritual love, that is, love to the Lord and charity to the neighbor, cannot exist except in innocence. But be it known that the innocence of sucklings, little children, and boys is only external, and that internal innocence is not possible in man till after he has been born anew, that is, becomes again, as it were, a suckling, a little child, and a boy. It is these states that are signified in the word by these 3. For in the internal sense of the word nothing but what is spiritual is understood. Consequently, none other than spiritual birth, which is called rebirth and also regeneration. That the innocent quality called guiltlessness is signified by a boy or child is evident in Luke. Jesus said, "Whosoever receiveth not the kingdom of God as a child shall not enter therein." To receive the kingdom of God as a child is to receive charity and faith from innocence. In Mark, Jesus took a child and set him in the midst of them. And when he had taken him in his arms, he said to them, "Whosoever shall receive one of such children in my name receiveth me." By a child here is represented innocence. And one who receives this receives the Lord, because he is the source of all innocence. Everyone can see that to receive a child in the Lord's name is not literally to receive a child, thus that something heavenly must be represented thereby. In Matthew, "The children cried in the temple, Hosanna to the Son of David. The priests were indignant, and therefore Jesus saith to them, Did ye never read, Out of the mouth of babes and sucklings thou hast perfected praise? The children's crying, "Hosanna to the Son of David," was to represent that only innocence acknowledges and receives the Lord, that is, they in whom there is innocence. By out of the mouth of babes and sucklings thou hast perfected praise, is signified that praise can come to the Lord in no other way than through innocence. For by this alone is effected all communication and all influx, and consequently access. It is for this reason that the Lord says, "Unless ye be converted and become as children, ye shall not enter into the kingdom of the heavens." In the following passages also by a boy or child is signified innocence. In Zechariah, "The streets of the city shall be full of boys and girls playing in the streets thereof," speaking of the New Jerusalem or the Lord's kingdom. In David, "Praise Jehovah, young men and maidens, old men with the children." Again, "Jehovah reviveth thy life from the pit. He filleth thy mouth with good, so that thou renewest thy childhood like the eagle." In Joel, "They have cast a lot upon my people, because they have given a boy for a harlot, and sold a girl for wine that they have drunk." In Jeremiah, "Through thee will I scatter man and woman, and through thee will I scatter the old man and the child, and through thee will I scatter the young man and the maid." In Isaiah, "Unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, God, Hero, Father of Eternity, Prince of Peace." Number 5237. Servant to the captain of the guards. This signifies wherein was truth that might serve primarily for interpretation, as is evident from servant being predicated of truth, and from the signification of the captain of the guards, namely things of primary importance for interpretation. And because truth is of service for the interpretation of the word, truth thus serving is signified here by servant to the captain of the guards. Number 5238. "And we told him," that this signifies that there was perception therefrom, is evident from the signification of telling as being perception. Number 5239. "And he interpreted to us our dreams." This signifies what was in the things foreseen obscurely, as is evident from the signification of interpreting, namely, what was therein, and from the signification of dreams, namely, things foreseen obscurely. Number 5240. "To each one according to his dream he did interpret," signifies from truth. "And it came to pass as he interpreted to us, so it was," signifies that such was the event, as may be seen from the fact that these words signify the occurrence of the matter, which in truth was such as he had foretold. Number 5241. "Me he restored to my office." This signifies that the sensuous of the intellectual part was accepted, as is evident from the signification of the butler who is here meant by me, namely the sensuous of the intellectual part, see above, and from the signification of restoring to office, namely reducing to order and making subordinate, thus also accepting. Number 5242. "And him he hanged." This signifies that the sensuous of the will part was rejected, as is evident from the signification of the baker who is here meant by him, namely the sensuous of the will part, see above, and from the signification of hanging, namely rejecting. There is no need to explain these things any further, because they have been explained before and are here repeated for the sake of the series. Number 5243, verse 14. And Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the pit. And he shaved and changed his garments, and came unto Pharaoh. And Pharaoh sent signifies the inclination of the new natural, and called Joseph signifies to receive the celestial of the spiritual, and they brought him hastily out of the pit, signifies a speedy rejection of such things as from the state of temptation were a hindrance, and thereby a change. And he shaved signifies rejection and change as to what is of the exterior natural, and changed his garments signifies as to what is of the interior natural by putting on what is suitable, and came unto Pharaoh signifies communication thereby with the new natural. Number 5244. And Pharaoh sent. This signifies the inclination of the new natural, as is evident from the representation of Pharaoh, namely, the new natural man. The inclination to receive the celestial of the spiritual is signified by his sending and calling Joseph. The inclination itself is plain from what is said further on, that he set him over his house and over all the land of Egypt, and said that all his people should kiss his mouth. In regard to this matter, when the state is complete, that is, when all things have been prepared in the natural for receiving influx from the interior or higher degree, and for the assimilation of what flows in, then the natural has an inclination, that is, has an affection for receiving. In this way the one is accommodated to the other when the man is being made new by the Lord. Number 5245. And called Joseph. This signifies to receive the celestial of the spiritual, as is evident from the representation of Joseph, namely, the celestial of the spiritual. That receiving this is signified by his calling may be seen just above. Number 5246. And they brought him hastily out of the pit. This signifies a speedy rejection of such things as from the state of temptation were a hindrance, and thereby a change, as is evident from the signification of a pit, namely a state of vast station and also of temptation, and from the signification of bringing him hastily out of it, namely a speedy rejection of such things as result from it, that is, from a state of temptation. For since a pit denotes a state of temptation, to bring any one hastily out of it denotes to remove such things as result from that state, and consequently to reject them, as is plain also from what follows. For he rejected what was of the pit, inasmuch as he shaved himself and changed his garments. A state of temptation in respect to the ensuing state is also like the condition of a pit or dungeon, squalid and unclean. For when man is being tempted, unclean spirits are near him and surround him, and excite the evils and falsities in him, and also keep him in them and exaggerate them, even to despair. Hence it is that the man is then in squalor and uncleanness. Moreover, when this state is presented to view in the other life, for all spiritual states can there be presented to the sight, it appears like a thick mist exhaled from unclean places, and a stench from it is also perceived. Such is the appearance of the sphere that encompasses one who is in temptation and also in vastation, that is, who is in a pit in the lower earth. But when the state of temptation ceases, the mist is dispersed, and the air clears. The reason is that by means of temptation the falsities and evils in man are laid open and removed. When they are laid open, that mist appears, but when they are removed, the air clears. The change of this state is also signified by Joseph's shaving himself and changing his garments. Moreover, a state of temptation may be compared with that of a man among robbers. On escaping, his hair is disheveled, his countenance wild, and his clothing torn. If he yields in temptation, he remains in this state. But if he conquers in temptation, then after he has composed his face, combed his hair, and changed his clothing, he comes into a cheerful and serene state. Moreover, there are infernal spirits and genii who, like robbers, surround and attack the man at these times, and bring on the temptations. From this it is now plain that by their bringing him hastily out of the pit is signified a speedy rejection of such things as from the state of temptation were a hindrance, and thereby a change. Number 5247. And he shaved. This signifies rejection and change as to what is of the exterior natural, as is evident from the signification of shaving the head and the beard, namely, rejecting such things as are of the exterior natural. For the hair that was shaved off signifies this natural. The hair, both of the head and of the beard, corresponds in the grand man to the exterior natural, and therefore sensuous men, that is, they who have believed nothing but what is natural, and have not been willing to understand that there is anything more interior or purer than what they could apprehend by the senses, in the other life, when in the light of heaven, appear hairy, so much so that the face is scarcely anything but beard. Such hairy faces have often been seen by me. But they who have been rational, that is, spiritual men, in whom the natural has been rightly subordinated, appear with becoming hair. Nay, in the other life, the character of spirits in respect to the natural may be known from their hair. The reason why spirits appear with hair is that in the other life spirits appear altogether as do men on earth. Hence it is that the angels whose appearance is spoken of in the word are sometimes described as to their hair. From what has now been said, it is evident what is signified by shaving, as in Ezekiel. The priests, the Levites, the sons of Zadok, shall put off their garments wherein they minister, and lay them in the chambers of holiness, and they shall put on other garments. Neither shall they sanctify the people in their garments, and they shall not shave their heads, nor let their hair down. They shall verily poll their heads. This is said of the new temple and the new priesthood, that is, of the new church. And the putting on of other garments signifies holy truths. Their not shaving their heads nor letting down their hair, but polling their heads, signifies not rejecting the natural, but accommodating it so that it may be in accord, thus making it subordinate. Every one who believes the word to be holy can see that these and the rest of the things said by the prophet about the new earth, the new city, the new temple, and new priesthood will not be at all as is stated in the letter there, as that the priests, the Levites, the sons of Zadok, will minister therein, and will then put off the garments of their ministry and put on other garments, and will poll their heads. But that each and all of these things signify the things of a new church. Neither would the regulations have been commanded in regard to the high priest, the sons of Aaron, and the Levites in the following passages from Moses, if they had not contained holy things within. The priest, chief of his brethren, upon whose head the anointing oil hath been poured, and who hath filled his hand to put on the garments, shall not shave his head, and shall not rip up his garments. The sons of Aaron shall not make their head bald, neither shall they shave the corner of their beard. They shall be holy to their God, and not profane the name of their God. Thus shalt thou purify the Levites. Sprinkle the waters of expiation upon them, and they shall make a razor to pass over their flesh, and they shall wash their garments, and they shall be pure. What is there that is holy or of the church in these things? That the high priest should not shave his head, nor rip up his garments. That the sons of Aaron should not make their head bald, nor shave the corner of their beard. And that the Levites, when being purified, should be shaved upon their flesh with a razor. But to have the external or natural man subordinate to the internal or spiritual, thus to have both subordinate to the divine, this is holy, and is what the angels perceive when these passages of the Word are being read by man. So also it was with the Nazarite, who was holy unto Jehovah. If any man should by chance die very suddenly beside him, and he hath defiled the head of his Nazariteship, then he shall shave his head in the day of his cleansing. On the 7th day shall he shave it. And when the days of his Nazariteship are fulfilled, the Nazarite shall shave the head of his Nazariteship at the door of the tent of meeting, and shall take the hair of his head and put it on the fire that is under the sacrifice of peace offerings. What the Nazarite was, and what holiness he represented, may be seen above. That there should be holiness in his hair can never be understood unless it is known what hair is by correspondence. Thus to what holiness the hair of the Nazarite corresponded. In like manner it cannot be understood how Samson had strength from his hair, of which he speaks thus to Delilah. There hath not come a razor upon my head, for I have been a Nazarite of God from my mother's womb. If I be shaven, then my strength will go from me, and I shall become weak and be like any other man. And Delilah called a man who shaved off the 7 locks of his head, and his strength went from him. And afterwards, when the hair of his head began to grow after it was shaved off, strength returned to him. Who, without knowledge derived from correspondence, can know that the Lord as to the divine natural was represented by the Nazarite, and that the Nazariteship had no other meaning, and that Samson's strength was from this representation? One who does not know, and especially who does not believe, that there is an internal sense in the word, and that the sense of the letter is representative of the things in the internal sense, will scarcely acknowledge that there is anything holy in these things, yet they contain what is most holy. If a man does not know, and especially if he does not believe, that the word possesses an internal sense which is holy, neither can he know what the following passages unfold, as in Jeremiah. Truth is perished, and is cut off from their mouth. Cut off the hair of thy Nazariteship, and cast it away. In Isaiah, in that day shall the Lord shave with a razor that is hired in the passages of the river, even with the king of Assyria, the head and the hair of the feet, and shall also consume the beard. In Micah, make thee bald, and shave thee on account of the sons of thy delights. Enlarge thy boldness as the eagle, because they have departed from thee. Nor can he know the holiness involved in what is related of Elijah, in that he was a hairy man, and girt with a girdle of skin about his loins, nor why the children who called Elisha bald were torn by she-bears out of the wood. Elijah and Elisha represented the Lord as to the Word, thus the Word, specifically the prophetic word, as may be seen in what is prefaced to the 18th chapter of Genesis, and at number 2762. The hairiness and the girdle of skin signified the literal sense. A hairy man, this sense in respect to truths, and a girdle of skin about the loins, this sense in respect to goods. For the literal sense of the word is its natural sense, because it is from the things in the world, and the internal sense is the spiritual sense, because it is from the things in heaven. These two senses are like the internal and external of man, and because there is no internal without an external, for the external is the ultimate of order in which the internal subsists, therefore it was a reproach against the word to call Elisha bald, implying that it is devoid of an external, thus that the word has no sense adapted to the apprehension of man. From all this it is evident that every detail of the word is holy, but the holiness therein is not apparent to the understanding, except to that of one who knows its internal sense. Nevertheless, influx from heaven brings it to the perception of one who believes the word to be holy. This influx is effected through the internal sense, in which the angels are. And although this sense is not understood by the man, still it affects him, because the affection of the angels who are in it is communicated to him. From this it is plain also that the word has been given to man in order that he may have communication with heaven, and that the divine truth which is in heaven may affect him by means of this influx. Number 5248. And changed his garments. This signifies as to what is of the interior natural by putting on what is suitable, as is evident from the signification of changing, namely removing and rejecting, and from the signification of garments, namely what is of the interior natural, see below. Hence it follows that what was suitable, signified by the new garments, was put on. Garments are often mentioned in the word, and thereby are meant things beneath or without, covering things above or within. And therefore garments signify man's external, consequently his natural, because this covers his internal and spiritual. Specifically, by garments are signified truths of faith, because these cover the goods of charity. This signification has its origin from the garments in which spirits and angels appear clothed. Spirits appear in garments devoid of brightness, but angels in garments that are bright and are as it were made of brightness, for the very brightness around them appears as a garment, like the raiment of the Lord when he was transfigured, which was as the light, and was white and dazzling. From their garments also the character of spirits and angels can be known in respect to the truths of faith, because these are represented by garments. But truths of faith such as they are in the natural, for such as they are in the rational, appears from the face and its beauty. The brightness of their garments comes from the good of love and of charity, which shines through and causes the brightness. All this makes clear what is represented in the spiritual world by garments, and consequently what is meant by garments in the spiritual sense. But the garments that Joseph changed, that is, put off, were the garments of the pit or dungeon, and by these are signified things fallacious and false, which in a state of temptation are excited by evil genii and spirits, and therefore by his changing his garments is signified rejection and change in respect to what is of the interior natural, and the garments he put on denoted such things as would be suitable. Hence the putting on of things suitable is signified. See what has been said and explained above concerning garments, that celestial things are not clothed, but spiritual and natural things are, that garments denote relatively lower truths, that changing garments represented the putting on of holy truths, whence also came the changes of garments, that rending garments represented mourning over truth lost and destroyed. See also what is signified by him that came in not having on a wedding garment. Number 5249, and came unto Pharaoh. This signifies communication with the new natural, as is evident from the signification of coming, namely communication by influx, and from the representation of Pharaoh, namely the new natural. What the words in this verse involve is evident from what has been explained, for they treat of Joseph, how he was freed from the pit and came unto Pharaoh. Joseph in the internal sense represented the Lord as to the celestial of the spiritual, and Pharaoh represented the natural or external man. The pit in which Joseph was represented the state of the Lord's temptation as to the celestial of the spiritual, and as being called from the pit by Pharaoh signified the state of deliverance from temptations, and further the subsequent state of influx and communication with the new natural. From this it is plain that the internal sense here describes how the Lord made his natural new, and at last divine. These are the things the celestial angels think when this history is being read by man. Moreover, to think such things is to them most delightful, for they are in the Lord's divine sphere, thus as it were in the Lord, and in a perception of inmost joy when thinking of the Lord and of the salvation of the human race by the Lord's making divine the human in him. And in order that the angels might be kept in this most heavenly joy, and at the same time in wisdom, that divine process is fully described in the internal sense of the word, and at the same time therein the process of man's regeneration. For the regeneration of man is an image of the Lord's glorification. Some may possibly wonder what the angels converse together about, and consequently what men who become angels converse about after death. But be it known to them that it is about such things as are contained in the internal sense of the word, namely about the Lord's glorification, his kingdom, the church, the regeneration of man through the good of love and the truth of faith. But they speak of these things by mysteries that are for the most part inexpressible. Number 5250, verses 15 and 16. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and no one interpreteth it. And I have heard about thee, saying, When thou hearest a dream, thou canst interpret it. And Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, It is not in me, God shall answer peace to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, signifies the perception of the celestial of the spiritual from the natural. I have dreamed a dream signifies prediction. And no one interpreteth it signifies ignorance of what was therein. And I have heard of thee signifies the capacity of the celestial of the spiritual, saying, When thou hearest a dream, thou canst interpret it, signifies to perceive what is in the things foreseen. And Joseph answered Pharaoh signifies knowledge, saying, It is not in me, signifies that it was not from the human alone. God shall answer peace to Pharaoh, signifies from the divine human through conjunction. Number 5251. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph. This signifies the perception of the celestial of the spiritual from the natural, as is evident from the signification of saying in the historical parts of the word, namely perceiving, as often shown above, and from the representation of Pharaoh, namely the natural, and from the representation of Joseph, namely the celestial of the spiritual. The perception of the celestial of the spiritual from the natural is signified because the Lord is represented both by Joseph and by Pharaoh, by Joseph as to the celestial of the spiritual, and by Pharaoh as to the natural. Hence Pharaoh said unto Joseph signifies the Lord's perception from the celestial of the spiritual in the natural. But the nature and quality of this perception cannot be intelligibly explained, unless there has first been formed some idea of spiritual perception, and of the celestial of the spiritual, and also of the manner in which the natural is distinct from the spiritual. On these subjects something has indeed been said already, which should now be recalled. Number 5252. I have dreamed a dream. This signifies prediction, as is evident from the signification of a dream, namely foresight and hence prediction. That a dream here means prediction is plain also from what follows. For in the dream the 7 years of abundance of produce and the 7 years of famine were foretold. Number 5253. And no one interpreteth it. This signifies ignorance of what was therein, as is evident from the signification of interpreting as relating to what was therein. Hence ignorance of what was therein is signified by no one interpreteth it. In the internal sense, no one does not mean no one or none, the expression being merely negative, and here therefore it simply means not, thus that it is not known, or that there is ignorance regarding it. The reason is that in the internal sense, no person, nor even anything relating to a person, is regarded, and in the expression no one or none, something personal is generally implied. There are 3 things in general that perish from the literal sense of the word when it becomes the internal sense, namely what is of time, what is of space, and what is of person. The reason is that in the spiritual world there is neither time nor space, these 2 belonging to nature. And therefore it is said of those who die that they pass out of time and leave behind all that is of time. In the spiritual world nothing is regarded as relating to person, because directing the attention in speech to a person narrows and limits the idea, instead of extending it and making it unlimited. Extension and absence of limitation in speech cause it to be universal, and to comprise and to be able to express things innumerable and ineffable. Hence the speech of the angels is of this character, especially the speech of the celestial angels, which is relatively unlimited. And in consequence everything of their speech flows into the infinite and the eternal, consequently into the divine of the Lord. Number 5254. And I have heard about thee, signifies the capacity of the celestial of the spiritual. Saying, when thou hearest a dream thou canst interpret it, signifies to perceive what is in the things foreseen, as is evident from the signification of hearing about thee, namely to perceive and know that it is such, and consequently that there is the capacity. From the representation of Joseph, to whom these words are spoken, namely the celestial of the spiritual. From the signification of hearing, namely perceiving. From the signification of a dream, namely what is foreseen. And from the signification of interpreting, namely what was therein. From this it is plain that by these words I have heard about thee, saying, when thou hearest a dream thou canst interpret it, is signified the capacity of the celestial of the spiritual to perceive what is in the things foreseen. Number 5255. And Joseph answered Pharaoh. This signifies knowledge, as is evident from the signification of answering anything when questioned, namely explaining the matter, consequently knowledge. Number 5256. Saying, it is not in me. This signifies that it was not from the human alone, as is evident from the signification of not in me or not belonging to him when said of the Lord, who is represented by Joseph. namely, not from the human alone, but from the divine. For the divine foresees, consequently knows what is therein. For when the Lord was in the world, he indeed had foresight and providence in the human from the divine. But since his glorification, these are from the divine alone. For the human glorified is the divine. Regarded in itself, the human is nothing but a form receptive of life from the divine. But the Lord's glorified human, or his divine human, is not a form recipient of life from the divine, but is the very being, esse of life. And that which proceeds therefrom is life. Such is the idea that the angels have in regard to the Lord. But they who at this day come from the Christian church into the other life have nearly all an idea of the Lord as being like any other man, not only separate from the divine, though indeed they ascribe what is divine to him, but also separate from Jehovah, and what is more, separate even from the holiness that proceeds from him. They do indeed say one God, but they think of three, and they actually divide the divine among three, for they distinguish it into persons, calling each God, and attribute to each a distinct nature. Consequently, it is said of Christians in the other life that they worship three gods, because they think of three, however much they may speak of one. But they who have been Gentiles and have been converted to Christianity in the other life adore the Lord alone, and this because they have believed that it must have been that the supreme God would manifest himself on earth as a man, and that the supreme God is the divine man, and that if they had not this idea of the supreme God, they could have none at all, and so could not think about God, consequently could not know him, still less love him. Number 5257. God shall answer peace to Pharaoh. This signifies from the divine human by conjunction, as is evident from what was said just above, and from the signification of the peace that God shall answer as being from the Lord's divine human. That God denotes the divine is evident without explanation, and that peace in the supreme sense is the Lord may be seen above. This answer comes through conjunction, namely with the celestial of the spiritual and thereby with the natural, because this conjunction is here treated of. Number 5258, verses 17 to 24. And Pharaoh spake unto Joseph, In my dream, behold, I stood upon the bank of the river, and behold, out of the river there came up 7 kine, fat in flesh and beautiful in form, and they fed in the sedge. And behold, 7 other kine came up after them, thin and evil in form exceedingly, and lean in flesh, such as I have never seen in all the land of Egypt for badness. And the lean and evil kine did eat up the first 7 fat kine. And they ate them up, and it was not known that they had eaten them up, and their appearance was bad as in the beginning. And I awoke, and I saw in my dream, and behold, 7 ears came up upon one stalk, full and good. And behold, 7 ears withered thin and parched with the east wind, sprung up after them. And the thin ears swallowed up the 7 good ears. And I told it unto the magicians, and no one declareth it to me. And Pharaoh spake unto Joseph, signifies the thought of the celestial of the spiritual from the natural. In my dream signifies what was foreseen obscurely. Behold, I stood upon the bank of the river signifies from boundary to boundary. And behold, out of the river signifies that in the boundary. There came up 7 kine signifies truths of the natural. Fat in flesh signifies that were of charity. And beautiful in form signifies that were of faith thence. And they fed in the sedge signifies instruction. And behold, 7 other kine came up after them, signifies falsities that were of the natural nearby. Thin and evil in form exceedingly, signifies that were empty and of no faith. And lean in flesh, signifies neither were of charity. Such as I have never seen in all the land of Egypt for badness, signifies such as could in no way be conjoined with truths and goods. And the lean and evil kind did eat up, signifies that falsities not of charity nor of faith expelled. The first 7 fat kine signifies the truths of faith from charity, and they ate them up, signifies interior expulsion. And it was not known that they had eaten them up, signifies that the truths of good were no longer apperceived. And their appearance was bad as in the beginning, signifies that there was no communication nor conjunction. And I awoke, signifies a state of enlightenment. And I saw in my dream, signifies what was further foreseen obscurely. And behold, 7 ears came up upon one stalk, signifies the conjunction of external knowledges of the natural. Full and good, signifies to which the things of faith and charity could be applied. And behold, 7 ears withered thin and parched with the east wind, signifies external knowledges of no use and full of cupidities, sprang up after them, signifies appearing near. And the thin ears swallowed up the 7 good ears, signifies that the useless external knowledges expelled those that were of use. And I told it unto the magicians, signifies a consultation with interior external knowledges. And no one telleth it to me, signifies that nothing was apperceived from them. Number 5259. And Pharaoh spake unto Joseph. This signifies the thought of the celestial of the spiritual from the natural, as is evident from what was said above, where similar words are used, save only that it is there written that Pharaoh said unto Joseph, while here it is said that he spake unto him. For saying signifies perception, but speaking thought. Pharaoh spake unto Joseph signifies the thought of the celestial of the spiritual from the natural, and not the reverse, because what is exterior never thinks from itself, but from what is interior, or what is the same thing, what is lower does not think except from what is higher, although, while the interior or higher is thinking in the exterior or lower, it appears as if the exterior or lower is thinking from itself. This, however, is an illusion. It is like one who sees something in a mirror, and not knowing a mirror to be there, imagines that the object is where it appears to be, although it is not there. Now because the celestial of the spiritual is interior or higher, and the natural is exterior or lower, the thought of the celestial of the spiritual from the natural is signified in the internal sense by Pharaoh spake unto Joseph. In a word, nothing that is beneath can do anything of itself, but whatever it can do it has from what is higher, and because this is so, it evidently follows that everything is from the Most High, that is, from the divine. Consequently, man's thought from the understanding and action from the will he has from the Most High or from the divine. But his thinking falsely and acting badly comes from the form he has impressed upon himself, and his thinking truly and acting well comes from the form he has received from the Lord. For it is known that one and the same power and energy produces different motions according to the forms of the mediates and the extremes. Thus in man, life from the divine produces diverse thoughts and actions according to the forms. Number 5260. The things that follow in this series are almost the same as those before explained in this chapter, from Numbers 51:95 to 52:17, and therefore further explanation is needless. Number 5261, verses 25 to 27. And Joseph said unto Pharaoh, The dream of Pharaoh is one. What God doeth he hath shown to Pharaoh. The 7 good kine are 7 years, and the 7 good ears are 7 years. The dream is one. And the 7 thin and evil kine that came up after them are 7 years. And the 7 empty ears parched with the east wind shall be 7 years of famine. And Joseph said unto Pharaoh signifies the perception of the natural from the celestial of the spiritual. The dream of Pharaoh is one, signifies the like in both which was foreseen. What God doeth he hath shown to Pharaoh, signifies that it was given to the natural to apperceive what was provided. The 7 good kine are 7 years, signifies states of the multiplication of truth in the interior natural. And the 7 good ears are 7 years, signifies states of the multiplication of truth in the exterior natural. The dream is one, signifies that there will be both by conjunction. And the 7 thin and evil kine that came up after them are 7 years, signifies states of the multiplication of the falsity that infests the interior natural. And the 7 empty ears parched with the east wind, signifies states of the multiplication of the falsity that infests the exterior natural. Shall be 7 years of famine, signifies hence a lack and seeming privation of truth. Number 5262. And Joseph said unto Pharaoh, This signifies the perception of the natural from the celestial of the spiritual, as is evident from the signification of saying in the historical parts of the word, namely perceiving, from the representation of Joseph, namely the celestial of the spiritual, and from the representation of Pharaoh, namely the natural. Number 5263. The dream of Pharaoh is one. This signifies the like in both, which was foreseen, as is evident from the signification of a dream, namely what is foreseen, from the representation of Pharaoh, namely the natural, and from the signification of is one, as here being the like in both, namely in the interior and exterior natural. That the natural is twofold may be seen above. For what Pharaoh dreamed about the kine was foreseen concerning the interior natural, and what he dreamed about the ears of corn was foreseen concerning the exterior natural. And because both naturals act as one by conjunction, the like in both is signified. Number 5264. What God doeth he hath shown to Pharaoh. This signifies that it was given to the natural to apperceive what was provided, as is evident from the signification of what God doeth, namely what is provided, see below. From the signification of showing, namely communicating and revealing, and from the representation of Pharaoh, namely the natural. From this it is plain that by what God doeth he hath shown to Pharaoh is signified that it was given to the natural to apperceive what was provided. What God doeth is what is provided, because everything that God, that is the Lord, does is providence, which being from the divine has within it what is eternal and infinite. What is eternal because its view is not bounded by beginning or end, and what is infinite because it simultaneously regards what is universal in every particular, and every particular in what is universal. This is called providence, and because this quality is inherent in everything the Lord does, his doing cannot be expressed by any other word than providence. That in each and all things the Lord does, there is what is infinite and eternal, will of the Lord's divine mercy be elsewhere illustrated by examples. Number 5265. The 7 good kine are 7 years. This signifies states of the multiplication of truth in the interior natural, as is evident from the signification of kine, namely, in a good sense, truths of the interior natural, and from the signification of years, namely, states. There were 7 because 7 signifies what is holy, and hence adds holiness to the subject, and it also involves an entire period from beginning to end. Hence it is that 7 kine and 7 ears of corn were seen in the dream, and that afterwards there were 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine. Hence also it is that the 7th day was hallowed, and that in the representative church the 7th year was the sabbatical year, and that after 7 times 7 years was the Jubilee. 7 signifies holy things from the signification of numbers in the world of spirits, where every number has a meaning. Numbers, simple and compound, have sometimes appeared to my sight, and once in a long series. And as I wondered what they signified, I was told that they came forth from angelic speech, and that sometimes things are expressed by numbers. These numbers do not appear in heaven, but in the world of spirits, where such things are presented to view. This was known to the most ancient people who were celestial men and conversed with angels, and hence they formed an ecclesiastical reckoning by means of numbers, which expressed universally the things expressed particularly by words. But what each number expressed was forgotten by their posterity, except what was signified by the simple numbers 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 12, and derivatively by 24, 72, and 77, especially that 7 signified what is most holy, in the supreme sense the divine itself, and in the representative sense the celestial of love. This is the reason why the state of the celestial man was signified by the 7th day. That numbers signify things is obvious from very many numbers in the Word, as from these in the Revelation. Let him that hath intelligence compute the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. And again, the angel measured the wall of the holy Jerusalem 144 cubits, which is the measure of a man, that is, of an angel. The number 144 is from 12 multiplied by itself, and from this comes 72. Number 5266. And the 7 good ears are 7 years. This signifies states of the multiplication of truth in the exterior natural, as is evident from the signification of ears of corn, namely, in a good sense, external knowledges, and consequently truths of the exterior natural, for these are called external knowledges, and from the signification of years, namely, states. What 7 signifies can also be seen there. Number 5267. The dream is one. This signifies that there will be both by conjunction, as is evident from what was said above. Number 5268. And the 7 thin and evil kine that came up after them are 7 years. This signifies states of the multiplication of the falsity that infests the interior natural, as is evident from the signification of kine, namely, in the true sense, truths in the interior natural, but in the opposite sense, falsity therein. And therefore the former are called good kine, but the latter thin and evil. From the signification of coming up, namely, progression towards interior things, and from the signification of years, namely, states. As 7 signifies what is holy, so too in the opposite sense it signifies what is profane. For most of the expressions in the word have also an opposite sense, and this for the reason that the same things that take place in heaven on flowing down towards hell are changed into the opposite things and actually become opposite. Hence the holy things signified by 7 there become profane. That by 7 both holy and profane things are signified may be confirmed from the passages in the Revelation alone where 7 is mentioned. First, that holy things are signified. John to the 7 churches, grace and peace from him who is, and who was, and who is to come, and from the 7 spirits that are before his throne. These things saith he that hath the 7 spirits and the 7 stars. Out of the throne went forth 7 lamps of fire burning before the throne, which are the 7 spirits of God. I saw upon the right hand of him that sat on the throne a book written within, and on the back sealed with 7 seals. I saw, and behold, in the midst of the throne stood a lamb, as though it had been slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent forth into all the earth. To the 7 angels were given 7 trumpets. In the days of the voice of the 7th angel the mystery of God should be consummated. The 7 angels that had the 7 plagues went forth out of the temple, clothed in linen white and shining, and girt about their breasts with golden girdles. Then one of the 4 animals gave unto the 7 angels 7 golden vials. That in the opposite sense 7 signifies profane things is plain from these passages also in the Revelation. Behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his heads 7 diadems. I saw a beast coming up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 diadems, and upon his heads a name of blasphemy. I saw a woman sitting upon a scarlet beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Here is intelligence, if any one hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains, where the woman sitteth upon them, and they are 7 kings. The beast that was and is not is himself the 8th king, and is of the 7, and he goeth into perdition. Number 5269. And the 7 empty ears parched with the east wind. This signifies states of the multiplication of the falsity that invests the exterior natural, as is evident from the signification of ears of corn, namely, external knowledges, which are the truths of the exterior natural, and therefore in the opposite sense falsities there. What is meant by being empty and parched with the east wind may be seen above.